The morning sun cast long shadows across Westminster Abbey as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before the ornate mirror in her private dressing room at Kensington Palace. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate headpiece that would soon accompany her to one of the most significant moments in British royal history. Today was not just any day. It was the day her father-in-law would be crowned King Charles III, and she would witness the ancient ceremony that would forever change the monarchy she had married into. Behind her, the soft murmur of voices filled the room as her styling team made final adjustments to her elegant cream and silver gown. The fabric had been carefully chosen to honor British craftsmanship, with intricate embroidery that told the story of the four nations of the United Kingdom. Each thread had been placed with precision, understanding that millions of eyes would scrutinize every detail of her appearance on this historic day. Prince William entered the room quietly, already dressed in his ceremonial uniform. The weight of the moment was evident in his posture. Today he would not only witness his father's coronation, but also take another step closer to his own destiny as future king. He placed a reassuring hand on Catherine's shoulder, their eyes meeting in the mirror's reflection. No words were needed. They both understood the magnitude of what lay ahead. Their three children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, were being prepared in the adjoining room under the careful supervision of their nanny. The sound of their laughter occasionally drifted through the walls, a reminder of the innocence that still existed within the formality of royal duty. George, at 9 years old, was beginning to understand his role in the line of succession, while Charlotte and Louis remained blissfully unaware of the historical significance they would witness. The palace corridors buzzed with controlled activity as staff members moved with practiced efficiency. Security personnel conducted final sweeps while communication devices crackled with updates from various checkpoints along the route to Westminster Abbey. Every detail had been planned months in advance, from the precise timing of their departure to the specific seats they would occupy during the ceremony. Catherine's private secretary approached with a leather-bound folder containing the order of service and final instructions. The day's schedule had been rehearsed countless times, yet the reality of the moment brought an entirely different energy. She reviewed the seating arrangements one final time, noting where other members of the royal family would be positioned, and mentally preparing for the choreographed movements that would be required during the ceremony. The historical weight of Westminster Abbey itself seemed to press upon everyone involved. For nearly 1,000 years, the ancient walls had witnessed the coronation of British monarchs, and today would add another chapter to that remarkable legacy. Catherine thought about the generations of royal women who had stood where she would stand, who had worn ceremonial dress and witnessed the sacred rituals that bound the monarchy to the British people. Prince William reviewed his own ceremonial duties, including the moment when he would be required to kneel before his father and pledge his allegiance. The gesture, steeped in centuries of tradition, would publicly acknowledge the new king while simultaneously highlighting William's position as heir apparent. The symbolism was not lost on either of them. This ceremony would reshape their roles within the royal hierarchy. As the final preparations continued, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a middle-class upbringing in Berkshire to becoming one of the most photographed women in the world, her path had been extraordinary. Today represented not just her father-in-law's ascension to the throne, but also her own continued evolution as a senior member of the royal family. The children were brought in for final inspection, their small faces serious with the understanding that today was important, even if they couldn't fully grasp why. Prince George wore a miniature version of his father's ceremonial attire, while Charlotte and Louis were dressed in outfits that balanced royal protocol with age-appropriate comfort for what would be a long day. Staff members made final adjustments to jewelry, checked that ceremonial medals were properly positioned, and ensured that every aspect of their appearance met the exacting standards required for such an occasion. The attention to detail was extraordinary. From the angle of Catherine's hat to the precise placement of William's ceremonial sword, nothing was left to chance. Communication devices throughout the palace confirmed that the route to Westminster Abbey was secure and ready. Crowds had been gathering since the early morning hours, with thousands of people lining the streets hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal family as they made their way to the ceremony. The enthusiasm of the public added an element of celebration to what could otherwise feel overwhelming in its formality. The final moments before departure were filled with quiet intensity. Catherine took one last look in the mirror, adjusting a small detail of her ensemble while mentally preparing for the cameras that would document every expression, every gesture throughout the day. She understood that her demeanor would be analyzed and interpreted by media outlets around the world, adding another layer of pressure to an already significant occasion. Prince William gathered his family together for a brief private moment before they would step into the public eye. He spoke quietly to each of the children, reminding them of their expected behavior while reassuring them that despite the formality of the day, they were participating in something truly special. The love and support within their small family unit provided strength for what lay ahead. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary of Kensington Palace, Catherine felt the weight of history settling around her. Today would mark not just the beginning of a new reign, but also another step in her own journey as a future queen consort. The woman who had once been Kate Middleton was now fully embracing her role as the Princess of Wales, understanding that her actions and presence would help shape the monarchy for generations to come. The final call came through the communication systems. It was time to depart for Westminster Abbey, where centuries of tradition awaited their arrival and participation in one of the most sacred ceremonies in British constitutional life. The armored Bentley pulled away from Kensington Palace with practiced precision, its bulletproof windows reflecting the morning sunlight as it began the carefully planned journey to Westminster Abbey. Inside, the Wales family sat in contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the historic day unfolding before them. Catherine gazed out at the crowds already lining the streets, their faces bright with excitement and anticipation for the royal spectacle they were about to witness. Prince William reviewed the day's protocol one final time, his military training evident in his methodical approach to preparation. He understood that today marked a fundamental shift in the monarchy, with his father finally ascending to the throne after decades as heir apparent. The weight of his own future kingship seemed to settle more heavily on his shoulders with each passing mile toward the abbey. The children pressed their faces to the windows, marveling at the sea of people who had gathered to celebrate the coronation. Prince George asked quiet questions about what they would see and do, his young mind trying to process the significance of the ceremony he was about to witness. Princess Charlotte waved tentatively at the crowds, her natural warmth shining through. Despite the formal nature of the occasion, security motorcycles flanked their vehicle, their riders maintaining constant communication with command centers throughout London. The route had been planned with military precision, taking into account everything from crowd control to potential security threats. Every intersection, every building, every possible vantage point had been assessed and secured in the weeks leading up to this moment. As they traveled through central London, Catherine reflected on the transformation of her life since joining the royal family. The young woman who had once shopped anonymously on high streets was now one of the most recognized faces in the world, her every appearance scrutinized and analyzed by media outlets across the globe. Today's ceremony would cement her position within the royal hierarchy in ways that few could fully understand. The crowds grew thicker as they approached Westminster, with people who had traveled from across the Commonwealth nations and beyond to witness this historic moment. Union Jacks fluttered alongside flags from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and dozens of other countries that recognized the British monarch as their head of state. The international significance of the day was evident in the diversity of the gathered crowds. Prince Louis, the youngest of the Wales children, dozed fitfully against his mother's arm, the early morning preparations having taken their toll on his small frame. Catherine smoothed his hair gently, understanding that the long ceremony ahead would test the patience of all three children, but particularly her youngest, who was still adjusting to the demands of public royal duties. The radio crackled with updates from various checkpoints along their route, confirming that all security protocols were being followed and that the timing was proceeding exactly as planned. The precision required for such an event was extraordinary. Thousands of people had worked for months to ensure that every aspect of the coronation would unfold without incident. William's thoughts turned to his father, who would already be at Westminster Abbey, undergoing his own final preparations for the ceremony. The relationship between father and son had evolved significantly over the years, particularly following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Today would represent the culmination of Charles's lifelong preparation for the throne, but also the beginning of William's more prominent role as heir apparent. The ancient spires of Westminster Abbey came into view, their Gothic architecture standing as a testament to the continuity of British institutions across the centuries. Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness as she saw the building where she would soon witness one of the most sacred and symbolic ceremonies in constitutional monarchy. The Abbey had hosted coronations for nearly 1,000 years, and today would add another chapter to that remarkable history. Police barriers held back enthusiastic crowds who cheered and waved as the royal motorcade passed. The public's genuine affection for the Wales family was evident in their smiles and applause, providing a warmth that helped counterbalance the formal protocol of the day. Catherine waved back graciously, understanding that these people had made significant efforts to be present for this historic occasion. As they drew closer to the Abbey, the security presence became more visible, with officers positioned at every possible vantage point. The Metropolitan Police had coordinated with intelligence services to ensure the safety of not just the British royal family, but also the hundreds of foreign dignitaries who would be attending the ceremony. The logistics of securing such an event were mind-boggling in their complexity. The children became more alert as they sensed the growing excitement outside their vehicle. Prince George straightened his small uniform and checked that his ceremonial accessories were properly positioned, his natural sense of responsibility evident even at his young age. Princess Charlotte smoothed her dress and adjusted her small hat, already showing signs of the poise that would serve her well in royal duties throughout her life. Catherine's lady-in-waiting, who had been traveling in a separate vehicle, would meet them at the Abbey to provide final assistance with any adjustments needed to their ceremonial attire. Every detail of their appearance would be perfect for the cameras that would broadcast this moment to billions of people around the world. The pressure was immense, but Catherine had learned to channel that energy into grace and composure. The sounds of the crowd grew louder as they approached the final approach to Westminster Abbey. Ceremonial guards in their distinctive uniforms stood at attention, their presence adding to the pageantry and tradition that would define the day. The sight of these soldiers, some of whom William had served alongside during his military career, brought an additional layer of meaning to the proceedings. Prince William reached for Catherine's hand as their vehicle began the final approach to the Abbey entrance. The gesture was subtle but significant, a private moment of connection before they would step into the full glare of public attention. Their partnership had been tested by many challenges over the years, but today they would stand together as witnesses to history in the making. The radio confirmed their imminent arrival at Westminster Abbey, triggering a cascade of communications throughout the security apparatus that had been assembled for the coronation. In moments, they would step from the privacy of their vehicle into one of the most public and historically significant ceremonies in the modern world, carrying with them the hopes and expectations of millions of people who saw them as symbols of continuity and stability in an ever-changing world. The Bentley drew to a smooth halt at the designated arrival point outside Westminster Abbey, where a red carpet stretched toward the ancient entrance that had welcomed monarchs for centuries. Catherine took a deep breath as she heard the roar of the crowd intensify, knowing that in moments she would step into the full view of thousands of spectators and millions more watching around the world. The weight of the moment pressed upon her as she prepared to play her part in this historic ceremony. Prince William was the first to emerge from the vehicle, his military bearing evident as he stepped onto the red carpet and acknowledged the crowd with a brief nod. His ceremonial uniform caught the morning light, the medals and insignia reflecting his service to both country and crown. Behind him, Catherine appeared with practiced grace, her elegant gown flowing perfectly as she stepped from the car with the poise that had made her one of the most admired members of the royal family. The children followed their parents with careful steps, Prince George maintaining the serious expression appropriate for such a solemn occasion, while Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis looked around with wide-eyed wonder at the spectacle surrounding them. The crowd's cheers grew louder at the sight of the young royals, their presence adding a touch of warmth and humanity to the formal proceedings. Cathedral bells rang across London as the Wales family made their way up the steps of Westminster Abbey, each toll marking another moment in the unfolding ceremony that would crown a new king. The sound reverberated through the ancient stones of the building, connecting this moment to centuries of similar ceremonies that had taken place within these sacred walls. Catherine felt the historical significance of each step she took toward the entrance. Inside the abbey, over 2,000 guests had already taken their seats in carefully arranged sections that reflected the complex hierarchies of British society and international diplomacy. Foreign heads of state, religious leaders, members of parliament, and representatives from across the Commonwealth had gathered to witness this transition of power. The sight was overwhelming in its scope and significance. Royal protocol officers guided the Wales family to their designated positions, ensuring that every movement was executed with the precision required for such a formal ceremony. Catherine's assigned seat provided a clear view of the high altar, where King Charles would soon be crowned, allowing her to witness every moment of the sacred ritual that would transform her father-in-law into the constitutional monarch of 16 nations. The children were positioned with careful consideration for both protocol and their young ages, with arrangements made to ensure their comfort during what would be a lengthy and complex ceremony. Prince George sat with the gravity appropriate for his position in the line of succession, while Charlotte and Louis were placed where they could see clearly without causing disruption to the formal proceedings. As they settled into their seats, Catherine surveyed the magnificent interior of Westminster Abbey, its soaring Gothic arches and ancient stonework providing a breathtaking backdrop for the ceremony about to unfold. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the assembled congregation and adding an ethereal quality to the already sacred atmosphere. The Dean of Westminster moved through the final preparations with centuries of tradition guiding every gesture and word. The coronation service followed rituals that had been refined and preserved across generations, each element carrying deep symbolic meaning about the relationship between monarch and people, between earthly power and divine authority, between past traditions and future responsibilities. Prince William's eyes followed the ancient ceremonial objects being prepared for use in the coronation, the crown jewels that represented the power and continuity of the monarchy, each piece carrying its own history and significance. The sight of these precious artifacts reminded him of his own future destiny, when he too would participate in such a ceremony as the one being crowned rather than as a witness. The assembled congregation represented a remarkable cross-section of British and Commonwealth society, from Nobel Prize winners to community volunteers, from military heroes to religious leaders. Their presence demonstrated the broad foundation of support and respect upon which the modern monarchy rested, an institution that had evolved to remain relevant while maintaining its historical roots. Catherine noticed familiar faces among the congregation, friends and colleagues from her charitable work, fellow members of the royal family, and dignitaries she had met during official engagements over the years. The sight of these familiar faces provided comfort in what could otherwise feel like an overwhelming display of pomp and ceremony, reminding her of the personal relationships that made royal duty meaningful. The children began to show signs of the lengthy preparation and early morning, with Prince Louis leaning against his mother's arm while trying to maintain appropriate behavior for such a formal setting. Catherine gently adjusted his position, understanding that managing 3 young children during such an important ceremony required constant attention while appearing effortless to the watching world. Choir members took their positions in preparation for the musical elements of the ceremony, their voices soon to fill the ancient space with hymns and anthems that had been performed at coronations for centuries. The music would provide both spiritual elevation and emotional resonance to the formal proceedings, connecting the assembled congregation to generations who had witnessed similar ceremonies in this same sacred space. Television cameras positioned throughout the abbey captured every angle of the unfolding ceremony, their presence a reminder that this ancient ritual was being shared simultaneously with audiences across the globe. The technology required to broadcast such an event was extraordinary, yet it remained as invisible as possible to preserve the timeless quality of the coronation ceremony itself. Security personnel maintained discreet but constant vigilance throughout the Abbey, their presence barely noticeable yet absolutely essential for ensuring the safety of the hundreds of world leaders and dignitaries who had gathered for the ceremony. The coordination required to protect so many high-profile individuals in one location represented one of the most complex security operations in modern history. As the final preparations were completed, a hush fell over the congregation in anticipation of King Charles's arrival. Catherine felt her heart rate increase slightly as she prepared to witness the moment when her father-in-law would be transformed from heir to sovereign, marking not just a personal milestone for their family, but a constitutional moment that would reshape the monarchy for generations to come. The great doors of Westminster Abbey stood ready to welcome the man who would soon be crowned King Charles III, while inside, 2,000 guests, including the Wales family, prepared to witness a ceremony that connected the modern world to traditions stretching back more than a millennium, binding past, present, and future in a single sacred moment of constitutional and spiritual significance. The magnificent organ of Westminster Abbey filled the ancient space with majestic chords as King Charles III entered the building, his presence transforming the atmosphere from anticipation to reverent solemnity. Catherine watched with deep emotion as her father-in-law processed down the nave, understanding that she was witnessing a moment that would be recorded in history books for centuries to come. The man she had known as a caring grandfather to her children was about to become the constitutional monarch of nations spanning the globe. Prince William stood with the congregation as his father passed their section, the complex emotions of the moment evident in his carefully controlled expression. This was the man who had raised him after his mother's death, who had guided him through the challenges of royal life, and who was now taking the final step in a journey that had spanned more than 7 decades. The personal and constitutional significance of the moment created layers of meaning that few could fully understand. The children watched with fascination as the elaborate procession moved through the abbey, their young minds absorbing images and experiences that would remain with them for the rest of their lives. Prince George observed with particular attention his position as second in line to the throne, making this ceremony especially significant for his own future. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis sat quietly, sensing the importance of the moment even if they couldn't fully grasp its historical significance. Archbishop of Canterbury began the ancient words that would transform Charles from heir to sovereign, each phrase carrying the weight of centuries of tradition and constitutional law. Catherine listened intently to the sacred language that bound monarch to people, understanding that these same words would one day be spoken over William and eventually over their son George. The continuity of the institution was both humbling and inspiring. The crown jewels were brought forward in a ceremony that had been repeated for generations, each precious object carrying its own history and symbolism. Catherine marveled at the St. Edward's crown, which would soon rest upon Charles's head, understanding that she was witnessing the use of artifacts that connected this moment to the very foundations of the British monarchy. The weight of history seemed to press upon everyone present. As the anointing began, performed behind a screen to preserve the sacred privacy of this most holy moment in the ceremony, a profound silence fell over the abbey. Catherine felt tears forming in her eyes as she contemplated the spiritual and constitutional transformation taking place just yards away from where she sat. The man emerging from behind that screen would be fundamentally changed in the eyes of the law and the people he would serve. Prince William's military training helped him maintain composure during these emotionally charged moments, but Catherine could see the pride and love in his eyes as he watched his father accept the responsibilities that would define the remainder of his life. The relationship between father and son had evolved over the years, and this ceremony represented the culmination of a lifetime of preparation and dedication to duty. The congregation rose as the Archbishop proclaimed the new king, their voices joining in the ancient acclamation that had echoed through Westminster Abbey for centuries. Catherine felt goosebumps rise on her arms as she participated in this historic moment, understanding that she was now officially the daughter-in-law of a reigning monarch rather than an heir apparent. The moment arrived for Prince William to pay homage to his father, the new king. Catherine watched with deep emotion as her husband knelt before Charles, speaking the words that acknowledged both filial loyalty and constitutional duty. This public demonstration of the line of succession was both deeply personal and profoundly symbolic, marking William's formal recognition of his father's sovereignty while highlighting his own position as heir apparent. The children observed this moment with wide eyes, seeing their father and grandfather participate in a ritual that emphasized the continuity of their family's role in British society. Prince George would one day kneel in a similar ceremony, while Charlotte and Louis would witness their brother's eventual coronation, as they were now witnessing their grandfather's transformation into king. Music filled the abbey as the ceremony continued, with choirs performing pieces that had been specifically chosen for this coronation, while maintaining connections to traditions stretching back centuries. Catherine found herself moved by the beauty of the performances, understanding that every note was being shared with audiences around the world who were experiencing this historic moment through television and digital broadcasts. The complexity of the ceremony was remarkable in its precision, with every participant knowing exactly when to stand, sit, or respond to the various elements of the service. Catherine had studied the order of service extensively, but experiencing it in person brought an entirely different understanding of the careful choreography required to execute such an elaborate and meaningful ritual. Foreign dignitaries watched, with respectful attention as they witnessed a ceremony unique to the British constitutional system, many representing nations that had different traditions for transferring power, but recognized the historical significance of what they were observing. The international presence emphasized the global reach of the modern Commonwealth and the continuing influence of the British monarchy. As various elements of royal regalia were presented to the new king, Catherine reflected on the symbolism inherent in each object: the orb representing the world under Christ's dominion, the scepters representing temporal and spiritual power, the ring symbolizing marriage to the nation. These ancient symbols carried meanings that transcended the personal and entered the realm of constitutional and spiritual significance. The moment approached when the St. Edward's crown would be placed upon Charles's head, the culmination of the entire ceremony, and the point at which he would be fully transformed from heir to sovereign. Catherine held her breath as she prepared to witness this climactic moment, understanding that she was about to see history made in the most literal sense possible. The archbishop lifted the heavy crown, its precious stones catching the light, streaming through the abbey's ancient windows. Time seemed suspended as the crown was lowered onto the king's head, and in that instant, Catherine knew she was witnessing a moment that would be remembered and studied for generations. Her father-in-law had become King Charles III, and their family's role in the monarchy had been forever transformed. Trumpets sounded throughout Westminster Abbey and across London as the coronation reached its climax, their triumphant notes announcing to the world that Britain had a new sovereign. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face as she participated in this extraordinary moment, understanding that she had witnessed something that few people in history had been privileged to experience: the peaceful and sacred transfer of constitutional power in one of the world's oldest continuing monarchies. The thunderous sound of "God Save the King" filled Westminster Abbey as the congregation rose to their feet, their voices joining in the national anthem that had taken on new meaning with Charles's coronation. Catherine felt the power of the moment wash over her as thousands of voices united in song, celebrating not just a new monarch, but the continuity of an institution that had weathered centuries of change and challenge. Prince William stood with military precision as he sang the familiar words, but Catherine could see the emotion in his eyes as he looked toward his father, now officially King Charles III. The transformation was complete, and with it came a fundamental shift in their family's position within the monarchy. William was now the heir apparent to a reigning sovereign, carrying new responsibilities and expectations that would shape the rest of his life. The children participated in the singing with the seriousness appropriate for such a moment, though Catherine could see that the length of the ceremony was beginning to test their patience and energy. Prince Louis leaned against her side, his small frame tired from the early morning and the intense concentration required to behave appropriately during such a formal and lengthy service. As the anthem concluded, the newly crowned King Charles Three processed through Westminster Abbey wearing the St. Edward's crown, its weight and significance evident in his measured steps and dignified bearing. Catherine watched with pride as the man she had come to know as a devoted family member carried himself with the gravity and grace required of a sovereign, understanding that she was witnessing the beginning of a new era in British history. The procession of royal family members began to form as they prepared to leave the Abbey and travel to Buckingham Palace, where they would appear on the famous balcony before the crowds gathered on the Mall. Catherine gathered her children and ensured that their ceremonial attire was properly arranged for the public appearances that would follow this sacred ceremony. Outside Westminster Abbey, the crowds had grown even larger during the ceremony, with thousands of people packed along the processional route, hoping to catch a glimpse of the newly crowned king and the royal family. The enthusiasm was infectious, with flags waving and cheers echoing off the buildings as the ceremonial procession prepared to make its way through central London. The gold state coach awaited King Charles III, its ornate decorations and historical significance making it the perfect vehicle for this momentous journey. Catherine marveled at the craftsmanship and tradition represented by the coach, understanding that it connected this modern coronation to centuries of similar ceremonies and celebrations that had marked the beginning of new reigns. Prince William helped organize his family for their own carriage ride back to Buckingham Palace, ensuring that the children were comfortable and prepared for the public attention they would receive during the procession. The sight of the young family would undoubtedly be one of the most popular elements of the day's celebrations, representing the future of the monarchy and the continuity of the royal line. As they took their places in the ceremonial carriage, Catherine felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The morning had been emotionally intense, filled with moments of profound historical significance that would remain with her for the rest of her life. Yet she knew that the day was far from over, with public appearances and celebrations still ahead. The procession began its stately journey through London, with military bands providing musical accompaniment and ceremonial guards maintaining perfect formation, despite the enthusiasm of the crowds pressing against the barriers. Catherine waved to the thousands of people who had made the effort to be present for this historic day, understanding that their enthusiasm and loyalty were essential elements of the monarchy's continuing relevance. Children in the crowds waved back with particular excitement when they spotted Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis in the carriage. The sight of the young royals clearly delighted the public, who saw in them the promise of the monarchy's future and the continuation of traditions that had shaped British society for generations. The journey to Buckingham Palace provided Catherine with time to reflect on the ceremony they had just witnessed and its implications for their family's future. William was now formally the heir apparent to a reigning monarch, a position that carried new expectations and responsibilities. She herself had become the Princess of Wales to a king rather than to an heir apparent, subtly but significantly changing her role within the royal hierarchy. The crowds grew even denser as they approached Buckingham Palace, with the Mall packed, from side to side with people hoping to witness the balcony appearance that would officially present the newly crowned king to his subjects. The sea of faces and flags created a spectacular sight that emphasized the public's continuing affection for the royal family and the institution they represented. Security personnel worked tirelessly to manage the enormous crowds while ensuring the safety of both the royal family and the thousands of spectators who had gathered for the celebrations. The logistics of such an event were extraordinary, requiring coordination between multiple agencies and careful planning to handle the unprecedented number of people who had come to London for the coronation. As their carriage approached the palace gates, Catherine could see the famous balcony where they would soon stand before the assembled crowds. The sight brought back memories of other significant royal occasions when she had stood on that same balcony. But today would be different. Today they would present a newly crowned king to his people for the first time. The children's excitement grew as they recognized the familiar surroundings of Buckingham Palace, their temporary fatigue forgotten in the anticipation of the balcony appearance. Prince George understood the significance of what was about to happen, while Charlotte and Louis were simply excited by the prospect of seeing the massive crowd that had gathered to celebrate their grandfather's coronation. Prince William squeezed Catherine's hand as their carriage entered the palace courtyard, both of them understanding that they were about to participate in one of the most public and ceremonial aspects of the coronation day. The balcony appearance would be seen by millions of people around the world, and would become one of the defining images of King Charles III's reign. The transition from the private, sacred ceremony in Westminster Abbey to the public celebration at Buckingham Palace represented the dual nature of monarchy, both a deeply spiritual and constitutional office and a public institution that belonged in many ways to the people who supported it. Catherine prepared herself for this final act of a truly historic day, knowing that she was about to help present the new sovereign to the world. The massive crowds gathered on the Mall erupted in cheers as the doors to the Buckingham Palace balcony opened, revealing King Charles III in his full coronation regalia to his subjects for the first time as their crowned sovereign. Catherine stood beside Prince William as they prepared to step onto the famous balcony, feeling the weight of history and the energy of thousands of people who had waited hours to witness this moment of celebration and national unity. Prince William emerged onto the balcony with his characteristic dignity, acknowledging the crowd's enthusiasm while maintaining the composure expected of the heir apparent to the newly crowned king. Catherine followed, her elegant gown catching the afternoon light as she stepped into view of the massive gathering below. The roar of approval from the crowd was overwhelming, a testament to the public's affection for the Wales family and their role in the monarchy's future. The children's appearances on the balcony created particular excitement among the assembled crowd, with Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis representing the future of the royal line. Catherine gently guided them to the front of the balcony, understanding that their presence would be one of the most memorable images of the coronation day and would symbolize the continuity of the monarchy for generations to come. King Charles III raised his hand to acknowledge the crowd. His gesture met with renewed waves of cheering and flag-waving that created a spectacular display of national celebration. Catherine watched with deep emotion as her father-in-law accepted the public's acclamation, understanding that this moment represented the completion of his lifelong preparation for the throne and the beginning of his reign as sovereign. The sight from the balcony was breathtaking, with the Mall stretching into the distance filled with a sea of people who had come from across the United Kingdom and beyond to witness this historic occasion. Catherine had stood on this balcony many times before, but never had she seen such a massive gathering or felt such an electric atmosphere of celebration and national pride. Aircraft from the Royal Air Force began their flyover of Buckingham Palace, their formations perfectly synchronized as they created moving patterns across the London sky. The crowd's enthusiasm reached new heights as the planes passed overhead, their appearance marking the military's tribute to the newly crowned sovereign and adding to the spectacular pageantry of the coronation celebrations. Prince Louis clapped excitedly at the aircraft display, his childlike wonder providing a moment of warmth and humanity amid the formal grandeur of the occasion. Catherine smiled as she watched her youngest son's reaction, remembering that despite all the protocol and ceremony, this was ultimately a family celebration of a grandfather who had achieved his lifelong goal of service to his nation. The bells of London began ringing in celebration, their joyous sounds carrying across the city and beyond as communities throughout the United Kingdom marked the beginning of the new reign. Catherine felt goosebumps as she listened to the cascading chimes, understanding that churches and communities across the Commonwealth were joining in this moment of celebration and unity. Television cameras captured every moment of the balcony appearance, broadcasting the images to billions of viewers around the world who were witnessing this historic transition of power. Catherine was conscious of the global audience watching their family participate in this ancient ritual, understanding that their actions and expressions would be analyzed and remembered for decades to come. Prince William placed his arm around Catherine's waist as they continued to wave to the crowd, their unity as a couple providing a powerful symbol of the monarchy's stability and future. The gesture was subtle but significant, demonstrating their partnership in carrying forward the responsibilities they had inherited and would one day pass to their own children. The crowd below continued their enthusiastic celebration, with many people wiping tears from their eyes as they witnessed this culmination of a day that had begun before dawn. With preparations and anticipation, Catherine could see families in the crowd pointing out the royal children to their own young ones, creating memories that would be passed down through generations of British families who had witnessed this historic coronation. Princess Charlotte waved with natural grace to the assembled crowd, her poise remarkable for such a young child participating in such a momentous occasion. Catherine felt pride watching her daughter handle the public attention with such composure, understanding that these early experiences would help prepare Charlotte for her own lifetime of royal service and public duty. The balcony appearance continued for several more minutes, allowing the crowd to fully celebrate their new sovereign and the royal family who would support him throughout his reign. Catherine understood that this public display was an essential element of the monarchy's relationship with the people, providing a direct connection between the institution and the citizens who sustained it through their loyalty and support. The formal balcony appearance drew to a close. Catherine reflected on the extraordinary day she had experienced. From the early morning preparations at Kensington Palace to this moment of public celebration, she had witnessed and participated in one of the most significant constitutional events in modern British history. The memories of this day would remain with her forever, marking a pivotal moment in both her personal journey and the story of the monarchy itself. The children began to show signs of fatigue after the long day of ceremonial duties, but their behavior throughout had been exemplary, demonstrating the training and preparation they had received for their public roles. Catherine felt proud of how they had handled the pressure and formality of such an important occasion, understanding that these experiences were building their confidence and understanding of their future responsibilities. King Charles III took one final moment to acknowledge the crowd's enthusiasm, his gratitude evident in his expression as he looked out over the thousands of people who had gathered to celebrate his coronation. Catherine watched this moment with deep emotion, understanding that her father-in-law was experiencing the culmination of decades of preparation and service, finally achieving the role for which he had been trained since childhood. The royal family began to step back from the balcony, their public duties for the coronation now complete. Catherine gathered her children and prepared to return to the private areas of Buckingham Palace, where they could finally relax after a day of intense public scrutiny and ceremonial responsibility. The contrast between public duty and private, family life had never been more apparent. As they moved away from the balcony, Catherine could still hear the crowd's continued celebration, their voices carrying through the palace windows as London continued to mark this historic day. The public's enthusiasm and loyalty provided a powerful reminder of the relationship between the monarchy and the people, a bond that had been renewed and strengthened through the successful completion of the coronation ceremony. The afternoon. Light was beginning to fade as the Wales family made their way through the corridors of Buckingham Palace, their formal duties complete, but their memories of this extraordinary day just beginning to settle into their consciousness. Catherine knew that they had all participated in something truly special, a ceremony that connected them to centuries of British history while launching a new chapter in the monarchy's continuing story. Prince William helped remove the children's ceremonial accessories as they prepared to change into more comfortable clothing, the formal requirements of the day finally relaxing as they returned to the private aspects of family life. Catherine watched her husband interact with their children, seeing in him the same dedication to duty and family that had characterized his father's approach to royal service throughout his long preparation for the throne. The coronation of King Charles III was complete, marking not just the beginning of a new reign but also a new phase in the Wales family's role within the monarchy. Catherine understood that this day had changed them all in subtle but significant ways, deepening their connection to the institution they served, while strengthening their resolve to carry forward its traditions and values for future generations. As the evening approached and the celebrations continued throughout London and across the Commonwealth, Catherine reflected on the privilege of having witnessed and participated in such a historic moment. The day had been emotionally exhausting but profoundly meaningful, providing experiences and memories that would influence their family's approach to royal duty for years to come. The coronation was over, but its impact on their lives and the monarchy itself would continue to unfold in the days, months and years ahead.